Imagine someone doesn't text you back. For most people, that's a mild inconvenience. For someone with BPD, it can feel like the end of the world. Not because they're dramatic, not because they're too sensitive, but because their brain, literally, physically, processes that silence differently. Today, we're going to look inside that brain. Because once you understand what's actually happening neurologically when rejection hits, you stop blaming yourself, and you start understanding yourself. Welcome to BPD Unboxed. Let's start with what rejection does to any human brain. When you experience social rejection, being left out, ignored, criticized, your brain treats it as a threat. This is ancient biology. For our ancestors, being excluded from the tribe meant danger, possibly death. So the brain evolved a threat detection system, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, to sound the alarm when social bonds are at risk. The amygdala fires, it sends distress signals. Your stress hormones spike. You feel a sting, maybe sadness, maybe anxiety. But then, in most people, another part of the brain steps in. The prefrontal cortex, the rational reasoning part. The part that says, hey, they're probably just busy. It doesn't mean anything. It puts the brakes on the amygdala. The storm settles. Life goes on. This is normal rejection processing, threat detected, threat assessed, emotion regulated. Now let's look at what happens in a BPD brain. Neuroimaging research on BPD has shown something consistently remarkable. The amygdala in BPD brains is hyperreactive. It fires faster, harder, and for longer when social or emotional threats appear. One study found that people with BPD showed significantly greater amygdala activation in response to emotionally charged images, even when those images were shown for just milliseconds, before conscious thought even had a chance to form. But that's only half of the story. The second part, the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, the pathway that's supposed to calm the alarm, is structurally and functionally weaker in BPD brains. The brake system is compromised. So what happens when someone with BPD doesn't get a text back? The amygdala fires hard and fast, just like anyone else's, but the prefrontal cortex can't quiet it. The alarm keeps ringing. The body stays in a state of threat. Cortisol floods the system. Heart rate spikes. The emotional experience becomes overwhelming, not because the person is weak, but because their brain's regulation pathway is underconnected. This is called emotional dysregulation, and it is not a character flaw. It is a neurological reality. There's a term that's increasingly used to describe this experience: Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, or RSD. Dysphoria means intense emotional pain or distress, and rejection sensitive means the trigger can be real or perceived. An unanswered message, a slightly cold tone of voice, a friend who doesn't invite you to something, a partner who seems distracted. The BPD brain doesn't always need confirmation of rejection. It needs only the possibility. And because the amygdala is scanning for threat constantly, it finds evidence everywhere. A pause in conversation, rejection, a changed plan, abandonment, a critique at work, proof of worthlessness. This isn't catastrophizing as a habit. This is a brain wired, through neurology and often through trauma, to anticipate loss. Researchers believe this wiring often develops in early childhood, when the environment was unpredictable, when attachment figures were inconsistent or frightening, when the nervous system learned connection is dangerous, loss is always coming. The brain adapted. It became hypervigilant to protect you. The problem is, that protection became the problem. This is why boundaries are so complicated in BPD. When most people draw a boundary, they experience mild discomfort, maybe some guilt. But for a BPD brain, a boundary, especially someone else's boundary, can trigger the full rejection alarm. The other person says, I need some space this weekend. The amygdala hears, I am leaving you. The body responds as if the relationship is ending, because the brain cannot easily access the prefrontal reasoning that would say, this is normal, healthy, not about you. And then the behavior follows the emotion. Panic, pleading, withdrawing, anger, silence. Not because the person wants to react this way, but because their nervous system has already declared an emergency, and they're trying to survive it. Understanding this doesn't excuse behavior, but it explains it. And explanation is the first step to something better. Change. Here's what the research also shows. And this matters. The brain can change. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, is real. It's documented. It's happening in people with BPD who work with therapists, practice DBT skills, and, critically, learn to understand what their brain is actually doing. Because when you understand that your reaction to rejection isn't you being broken, when you understand it's a hyperreactive alarm in an underregulated system, you can start to work with your brain instead of fighting it. That's what this channel is about. Not labels, not limits. The science. So you can finally understand yourself. If this video helped you, subscribe. We break down the BPD brain every week. Next week, we're covering something I've had a lot of you ask about. Why splitting, seeing people as all good or all bad, isn't a choice, and what's actually happening neurologically when it happens. I'll see you there. You're not too much. You're just wired differently. And that is something you can work with.